They say blood is thicker than water. It's a lovely sentiment, often quoted over holiday dinners and during tearful reconciliations. But they never tell you the second part of the proverb, the part that matters. Blood can be poisoned, while water remains pure. I learned that lesson at Gate B27 of JFK International Airport, staring through a plate glass window at the receding tail of a Boeing 777. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 68 years old, a widow, a mother, a grandmother, and the founder of Vance Architectural Interiors, a firm I built from a sketchbook and a second mortgaged home into a global name whispered in the same breath as Kelly Wearstler or Jean-Louis Degnaud. I have negotiated with Saudi princes, stared down stubborn union foremen in Manhattan, and turned derelict warehouses into palaces of glass and steel. I am not a woman easily rattled, but on that Tuesday in May, I was not Eleanor Vance, the magnate. I was just Nana, a grandmother in comfortable travel shoes, clutching a handbag that contained nothing of importance, watching my entire world fly away to Tuscany without me. The trip had been Mark's idea, of course. Everything was Mark's idea these days. My son-in-law, Mark Sterling, was a man so slick he could sell sand in the Sahara. He had entered our lives a decade ago, a whirlwind of charisma with a dazzling smile and a portfolio of disruptive tech startups that seemed to perpetually be on the verge of a breakthrough. My daughter, Amelia, my only child, was utterly besotted. I'd had my reservations. His eyes, a piercing blue, never seemed to settle. They were always scanning, assessing, calculating. But Amelia was happy, and her happiness had become the central project of my life since my husband, Robert, passed away. "A family trip, Eleanor," Mark had announced a few months prior, draping an arm around my shoulders. "All of us, you, me, Amelia, and the kids. A villa in the Tuscan hills. We'll drink Chianti, eat pasta, and you can finally relax. You deserve it." The kids, my beautiful grandchildren, Leo, 12, and Chloe, 8, had cheered. The idea was seductive. I had been working too much, filling the quiet hours of my widowhood with blueprints and balance sheets. The thought of 2 weeks under the Italian sun, with the laughter of my grandchildren as a soundtrack, was an oasis in the desert of my grief. So I agreed. I paid for everything, naturally. The first-class tickets, the sprawling 16th-century villa, the private tours. It was a pittance, really, a small price for family harmony. The airport was a chaotic symphony of hurried footsteps and garbled announcements. Mark was in his element, marshalling us through the check-in and security lines like a seasoned general. He'd handled all the documents, of course. "Let me take care of it, Eleanor. You just focus on relaxing," he'd said, with that award-winning smile. We were at the gate, an hour to spare. Leo was engrossed in his video game, and Chloe was drawing in her sketchbook, a talent she'd inherited from me. Amelia was scrolling through her phone, a slight, anxious line between her brows that had become a permanent fixture since she'd married Mark. "Oh my God," I said, a sudden cold stone dropping in my stomach. I was patting my travel tote. "My passport. I can't find my passport." Panic, sharp and immediate, flared in my chest. I emptied the contents of my bag onto the seat beside me. Wallet, reading glasses, a tin of mints, a paperback novel, lipstick. No dark blue booklet with the golden eagle. Mark's face was a mask of concern. "Eleanor, are you sure? Where did you last see it?" "You had it, Mark," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You took all our passports at the check-in counter." "Of course, and I gave it right back to you," he said smoothly, his tone placating, as if speaking to a confused child. "Amelia, darling, help your mother look." Amelia, flustered, began to search her own carry-on. "Mum, you have to remember. Mark gave it back to you. We all saw him." Her words didn't quite register. I was replaying the scene in my mind. He had gathered them, a neat stack, and handed them to the agent. Then what? My memory was a blur of noise and jostling crowds. Could I have been so careless? "We have to retrace our steps," I said, standing up, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maybe I dropped it at security. Mark glanced at his watch, a gold Rolex I'd bought him for his 40th birthday. "Eleanor, we can't. They're about to start boarding. I'll run back and check. You all wait here." He gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder and hurried off into the crowd. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The boarding announcement crackled to life. "We are now inviting families with small children and passengers in rows 40 to 50 to begin boarding Alitalia Flight 611 to Rome." That was us. Our connecting flight was from Rome to Florence. Chloe looked up, her big brown eyes wide with worry. "Is Nana going to miss the plane?" "No, sweetie, of course not," Amelia said, but her voice lacked conviction. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The final boarding call came. Mark was still gone. "Amelia, what are we going to do?" I pleaded. "I can't get on without my passport." "Mum, I don't know," she stammered, wringing her hands. "Mark will be back any second." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "Found it. Fell under a seat at the food court. Running back now, but the line at security is insane. You guys have to get on the plane. Don't lose the seats. I'll get Eleanor on the next flight out. I promise. Go now." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it left me dizzy. "He found it." I showed the text to Amelia. "He says you should board, and he'll get me on the next flight." Amelia read the message, and for a fleeting second, I saw something in her eyes. It wasn't relief. It was confirmation. The look vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a strained smile. "Oh, thank God," she said. "Okay, Mum. You wait for Mark right here. Don't move. We'll see you in Florence tomorrow at the latest." She hugged me, a stiff, perfunctory embrace. "Come on, kids." She hustled a confused Leo and a reluctant Chloe toward the gate agent. "But what about Nana?" Chloe's small voice piped up. "Nana will be right behind us, sweet pea. Now come on." I watched them scan their boarding passes. I watched my daughter, my only child, walk down the jet bridge without a single backward glance. I watched my grandchildren, the two brightest lights in my life, disappear into the mouth of the airplane. I stood there, a statue of foolish optimism, waiting for Mark. The gate agent made her final call. The heavy door to the jet bridge swung shut with a dull, definitive thud. The sign above the counter blinked from boarding to gate closed. And Mark was not there. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called Amelia. Voicemail. A cold dread, far worse than the initial panic, began to seep into my bones. It was a familiar feeling, one I hadn't felt in years. It was the feeling of being played. I walked to the large window overlooking the tarmac. There it was, the Alitalia plane, a colossal white bird. The jet bridge was pulling away. I saw the ground crew scurrying like ants. And then, through one of the small oval windows in the first-class cabin, I saw them. I saw Amelia adjusting Chloe's seatbelt. I saw Mark lean across her, laughing, accepting a glass of champagne from the flight attendant. He hadn't gone anywhere. He had never left the gate area. He was on the plane. They were all on the plane. The text message. Found it. A lie. The line at security is insane. A lie. I'll get Eleanor on the next flight. A lie. They had left me. Intentionally. The carefully constructed world of loving family shattered into a million pieces. The truth hit me not like a wave, but like a deep-sea pressure change, crushing me from all sides. The solicitousness, The insistence on handling all the documents, the feigned panic. It was a script, a meticulously rehearsed performance designed to get me to this exact spot, passportless and alone, watching them fly away on a vacation I had funded. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up my neck. Strangers were casting pitying glances at the old woman left behind. The gate agent gave me a sympathetic, "I'm sorry, Mum." For a moment, I felt the sting of tears. I felt small, old, and discarded. I felt like Nana. But then, something else rose from the ashes of my humiliation. It was a cold, hard fire I hadn't felt in decades. It was the fire that had propelled me to leave a dead-end job at 25 and start my own business. It was the fire that had helped me stare down bankers who told me a woman couldn't run a construction-adjacent company. It was the spirit of Eleanor Vance, and she had just been awakened from a long sentimental slumber. I turned away from the window. The hurt was still there, a raw wound, but it was now encased in ice. My mind, usually cluttered with thoughts of my grandchildren's birthdays and Amelia's anxieties, became sharp and clear, a diamond blade. I walked calmly away from the gate, my footsteps echoing with a newfound purpose. I pulled out my phone. I did not call my daughter again. I did not call my charlatan son-in-law. My first call was to a number I knew by heart. "Carla," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake that had just leveled my life. "It's Eleanor." Carla, my executive assistant for 30 years, a woman more organized and loyal than a Swiss watch. "Mrs. Vance, is everything all right? I thought you'd be in the air." "Change of plans. The trip is cancelled. I need you to do 2 things for me immediately. First, call Captain Evans at the Teterboro FBO. Have the Gulfstream G 650 ready for takeoff in 90 minutes. Destination, New York. File the flight plan now." There was a half-second pause on the other end of the line. Carla was too professional to ask questions. "Consider it done. And the second thing. Get me Arthur Jennings on the phone. Tell him it's a code red. Tell him to clear his entire weekend and meet me at his office as soon as I land." "And Carla," I added, my voice dropping to a whisper of steel, "pull up the files on every financial transfer I've made to Mark Sterling or any of his holding companies for the past 5 years. I want a complete portfolio on my desk when I get to the office tomorrow. Every wire, every check, every stock transfer." "Right away, Mrs. Vance." I hung up. I was no longer a grandmother abandoned at an airport. I was a queen whose kingdom had been threatened, and I was about to go to war. They boarded Alitalia to go to my villa in Tuscany. I was boarding my private jet to go to my lawyer's office. The sterile chaos of JFK's commercial terminal felt a world away from the hushed, carpeted luxury of the private aviation terminal. Within an hour, I was being escorted across the tarmac to my jet, its sleek white fuselage gleaming under the afternoon sun. Captain Evans, a handsome man with silver at his temples, greeted me at the steps. "Mrs. Vance, an unexpected pleasure. New York, I understand." "That's right, David. And please, have the bar stocked. I have a feeling I'm going to need it." As the G 650 ascended, a silver bullet climbing into the heavens, I looked down at the sprawling metropolis. Their plane was heading east, chasing the sun towards a vacation built on lies. My plane was heading west, back to the heart of my empire, back to the source of my power. The flight was short, but it gave me time to think. The rage was still there, a simmering cauldron, but the initial shock had given way to a chilling clarity. This wasn't a sudden, cruel impulse on their part. This was a plan. How long had they been planning it? The forgotten passport was just the final, brazen move in a much longer game. My mind raced back over the past few years. Mark's failed ventures, one after another. The seed money I'd provided, the bridge loans that were never bridged, the six-figure sum for a disruptive app that never launched. I had written it all off as the cost of keeping Amelia happy, of providing for my grandchildren. I had seen it as poor business acumen, not malice. How naive I had been. I remembered the documents Mark had asked me to sign 6 months ago. He had come to my home, his face a mask of solemn concern. "Eleanor, we need to talk about your health. You're working too much. What if something happens? We need to make sure Amelia can manage your affairs if you become incapacitated." He had presented me with a sheaf of papers, full of dense legalese. He'd pointed to a clause giving Amelia a limited power of attorney, specifically over the household accounts, to make things easier for her to pay bills. I was tired that day, distracted by a difficult project in Dubai. Robert had always handled the lawyers. I trusted my daughter. I'd signed. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a limited POA, was it? It was more, much more. They thought leaving me stranded, passportless, thousands of miles from home would give them the time they needed. They were expecting a confused old woman to spend a day or two navigating bureaucracy, by which time they would have done what? The jet landed smoothly at Teterboro. A black town car was waiting. 40 minutes later, I was walking into the August marble lobby of Jennings, Rutherford and Finch on Park Avenue. Arthur Jennings's firm had handled the Vance family's legal affairs for 50 years. His father had been my father's lawyer, and Arthur had been my rock since Robert's death. Arthur was waiting for me in his cavernous, wood-panelled office, a decanter of Macallan 25 and 2 crystal glasses on his desk. He was a tall, stooped man in his 70s, with eyes that had seen every form of human greed and folly. He took one look at my face and poured a generous measure of scotch into each glass. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "Carla said it was a code red. I haven't heard that phrase from you since the hostile takeover attempt in 08. I took the glass, the fiery liquid a welcome burn in my throat. I sat down in the leather chair opposite his desk, and, in a low, steady voice, I told him everything. The trip, the airport, the passport, the text message, the plane taking off, every humiliating detail. He listened without interruption, his face impassive, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the distant wail of a siren. "The power of attorney," he said finally, "the one you signed in November. I advised you against it. I told you it was too broad." "You did, Arthur," I conceded, shame coiling in my gut. "And I didn't listen. I thought it was for my own good. I thought my daughter loved me." "Love is a poor defense against avarice, my dear," he said gently. He swiveled in his chair and typed a few commands into his computer. He was a modern lawyer in an old-world office. "I've been running some checks since Carla called. Your primary brokerage account at Goldman Sachs has a flag on it. A transfer request was initiated this morning for $10 million. The destination is an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under a shell corporation, Sterling Innovations LLC. I felt the air leave my lungs. $10 million. The transfer requires a 2-step verification, Arthur continued, his voice grim. The second verification, a verbal confirmation, was scheduled for tomorrow morning. They needed you to be incommunicado. Stranded in a foreign country without a passport would have been ideal for their purposes. It all clicked into place. This wasn't just about a vacation. This was a heist. A grand, multi-million-dollar heist. And I, the loving mother and grandmother, was the mark. "They are not just greedy, Arthur," I said, the ice in my veins spreading to my heart. "They are criminals." "Yes," he agreed, "and we will treat them as such. So, Eleanor, what are your instructions?" I looked out his window at the glittering spires of the city I had helped build. the city I had conquered. My city, my empire, my legacy. An empire they had tried to steal to fund their vapid, worthless lives. My instructions? I said, turning back to him, my eyes hard. My instructions are simple. I want you to burn it all to the ground. Arthur allowed himself a grim, thin smile. With pleasure. Let's get to work. The next 48 hours were a blur of focused, calculated warfare. Arthur's office became my command center. Carla delivered the files I requested, thick binders detailing years of my one-sided generosity. We brought in a forensic accountant, a bulldog of a woman named Maria, and a private investigator, a quiet, observant man named Thorne. The picture they painted was uglier than I could have imagined. Mark's startups were nothing but shells designed to funnel my money into his pockets. He had debts all over town, gambling, bad investments, a lifestyle he couldn't afford. The 10 million was not for a new venture. It was to pay off a loan shark named Julian Croft, a man with a reputation for breaking more than just contracts. Thorne discovered that Mark was in over his head, and this trip, this theft, was his last desperate roll of the dice. Amelia's complicity was laid bare in her credit card statements. Extravagant shopping sprees, spa days, lunches at Daniel and Persay, all while telling me they were struggling a bit. She was a willing participant, blinded by the baubles Mark dangled in front of her. My heart ached for my daughter, for the bright, kind girl she once was. But that girl was gone, replaced by a greedy, weak-willed woman who would discard her own mother at an airport gate for a bigger house and a new Birkin bag. The ache was real, but it was the phantom pain of an amputated limb. The limb was gone, and I had to learn to live without it. The plan we formulated was not just defensive, it was a scorched earth offensive. First, Arthur contacted Goldman Sachs and the other banks. We cancelled the transfer, froze every account Amelia had access to, and revoked the power of attorney, citing fraud and undue influence. The digital doors to my fortune slammed shut in an instant. Second, the assets. The grand 5-bedroom house in Greenwich they lived in. It was in my name, a gift I'd never officially signed over. Arthur's team drew up eviction papers. The Mercedes G-Wagon Mark drove, the Range Rover Amelia used for the school run. Both were leased through my company. I made one call to the fleet manager. The cars would be repossessed. The American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card, that Mark so proudly used. It was a supplementary card on my account. I cancelled it personally, taking a small, bitter satisfaction in imagining the moment he would try to pay for a lavish dinner in Florence, only to be humiliatingly declined. Third, the legacy. I had Arthur draw up a new will. My entire estate, once destined for Amelia and her children, was to be redirected. The bulk of my fortune would now go to establishing the Robert Vance Foundation for architectural preservation and education. It was what my husband would have wanted. As for the grandchildren, I couldn't punish them. Arthur structured a new, ironclad trust for Leo and Chloe. It would pay for their education and provide a modest stipend upon reaching adulthood, but it would be managed by a third-party trustee, with a clause specifically stating that Amelia and Mark could never be beneficiaries or administrators. They would never touch a cent of it. By the time their flight was landing in Rome, their financial world had ceased to exist. They just didn't know it yet. They spent 2 days in a blissful, ignorant paradise. Thorne's contact in Italy sent us photos. Them laughing by the villa's pool. Them on a shopping spree on Via de Tornabuoni in Florence. Bags from Gucci and Prada in their hands. Each photo was a fresh stab of betrayal, but it only strengthened my resolve. They were dancing on my grave, and they hadn't even had the decency to make sure I was dead first. The first sign of trouble for them came on Thursday evening. I received an automated alert from my credit card company. A charge of €15,000 at a high-end Florentine jeweler had been declined. 10 minutes later, another alert. A €5,000 charge at a Michelin-starred restaurant, also declined. I pictured the scene. The awkward silence. Mark's slick charm failing him as he fumbles for another card. The waiter's polite disdain. It was a small, petty victory, but it was a start. The real storm broke on their 5th day in Tuscany. That was the day the repossession agents arrived at the Greenwich house. It was also the day the official eviction notice was posted on their front door. And it was the day Arthur's office sent a brutally concise, legally terrifying letter via courier to the villa in Italy, informing them of the revocation of all financial support, the pending legal action for fraud, and the termination of their residency. My phone rang late that night. The caller ID was a string of Italian numbers. I let it ring for a full minute before answering, my hand steady, my heart a block of ice. "Mum?" It was Amelia. Her voice was thin, reedy, laced with a panic I had never heard before. "Mum, what's going on? All our cards are being declined. The bank in Greenwich just called and said the house is in foreclosure. What did you do?" The sheer audacity of it, the immediate leap to blaming me, was breathtaking. "What did I do, Amelia?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I'm surprised you have time to call me. I assumed you'd still be busy enjoying the vacation I paid for, the one you were so eager to start that you couldn't be bothered to wait for your own mother." There was a choked silence on the other end. "Mum, it was a misunderstanding. Mark explained everything. The security line really was a nightmare." "Stop!" I cut her off, the single word as sharp as a slap. "Do not lie to me, Amelia, not anymore. I know about the passport. I know about the $10 million transfer. I know about Sterling Innovations LLC. I know about Julian Croft. I know everything." The silence was now absolute. I could hear her sharp, ragged breaths. Mark was likely standing beside her, his face pale, his mind racing for an escape route that didn't exist. "You left me at an airport gate," I continued, the words coming out as cold, hard pebbles. "You treated me like a piece of luggage that had become too heavy to carry. You thought I was a doddering old fool, a walking ATM you could decommission once you had the PIN. You made a fatal miscalculation. You forgot who I am." "Please, Mum, we can fix this," she sobbed, the desperation finally cracking her voice wide open. "We're so sorry. It was Mark. He's in some trouble. He pressured me." "And you folded," I stated, not as a question, but as a final judgment. "He pressured you, and you chose him. You chose the money. You chose a villa in Tuscany over your mother. You made your choice on that jet bridge, Amelia. Now I have made mine." "What are you going to do?" she whispered, her voice full of a terror she had never known, the terror of a life without a safety net. "I have already done it," I said. "The house is no longer yours. The cars will be gone by the time you get back. The accounts are frozen. The will has been changed. You are on your own. You and that parasite you call a husband." I could hear Mark shouting in the background, grabbing the phone. "Eleanor, you can't do this. You're destroying your family. Think of your grandchildren." "Oh, I have thought of them, Mark," I spat back, the venom I'd been suppressing finally rising. "And I have ensured that they will be cared for, educated, and protected from the greed and moral bankruptcy of their parents. They are the only part of my daughter I have left to salvage. As for you, I'd suggest you find a very good lawyer. My legal team will be filing a complaint with the district attorney's office on Monday morning. We have enough evidence of wire fraud and conspiracy to send you to prison for a very long time." I hung up. I did not wait for a reply. I blocked the number and turned off my phone. The silence in my vast, empty penthouse was absolute. There was no triumph, no joy. just a profound, aching emptiness. I had won. I had protected my legacy. I had exacted my revenge, and in doing so, I had officially lost my daughter. The fallout was swift and brutal. They flew back from Italy on economy tickets bought by a friend of Amelia's. They arrived in Greenwich to find new locks on the door and an empty garage. Their fall from the top of the local social ladder was spectacular. Mark, stripped of his charm and my money, was revealed for the hollow man he was. He was arrested 2 weeks later. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he turned on his partner, Julian Croft, and in a desperate plea bargain, implicated Amelia in the scheme to secure a lighter sentence. Amelia, my daughter, had to hire a public defender. She avoided jail time, but was sentenced to 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. She lost her husband, her home, her reputation, and her mother, all in one fell swoop. The last I heard, she was working as a cashier at a Trader Joe's in Stamford, sharing a small apartment with another woman. I sometimes see pictures of her on social media, posted by old acquaintances. She looks tired. She looks her age for the first time in her life. I see Leo and Chloe every other weekend. Our visits are supervised at Amelia's insistence, not mine. The court gave her primary custody, a small mercy. Our relationship is strained. They are old enough to understand that something terrible has happened, but not old enough to grasp the complexities of the betrayal. They love their mother, as they should. They look at me with a mixture of affection and confusion, and a little bit of fear. I am Nana, who gives them presents and takes them to museums, but I am also the woman who sent their father to prison and took their house away. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Perhaps. But they don't tell you that when you serve it, you often have to eat it alone. I sit here now, in my beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park, surrounded by priceless art and exquisite furniture. I have my empire. I have my fortune. I have my self-respect. But the blood that was supposed to be thicker than water is just a stain now. A memory of a family that I built and then was forced to tear down with my own 2 hands. The silence is the price of victory. And some nights it is deafening.